Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Talk Crime. We left off at part 1 at the search warrant to find the journals that would ultimately lead to a house of horrors. Like I said, they did find what they were looking for, but what they found in Stephen Powell's bedroom would give any detective nightmares. They found about 5,000 photos and videos of Susan. Even more disgusting, they found Ziploc bags dated with Susan's name on it. In these bags, Stephen kept Susan's underwear, tampons, pads, cotton balls she used to remove nail polish, Susan's hair clippings, and nail clippings. He kept many of these items from the time Susan and Josh lived with Stephen, as he often took things from her dirty laundry and garbage. Among the photos, they found edited and tampered photos Stephen had made to either place himself with Susan or Susan in a crass way. They also found videos of Stephen pleasing himself to these videos of Susan. Stephen also took many videos of Susan, both known and unknown to her. He would follow her to work and record her getting into her car. In his many journal entries, there were thousands and thousands of entries about Susan. Stephen was not only in love with Susan, as he had told detectives, he was obsessed with her. And Susan was not the only victim of Stephen's disgusting behavior. There were many other videos of other women Stephen was recording unknowingly. He was also recording videos of girls who lived next door, getting dressed in the bathtub or in private moments in their own home. These girls were minors. Okay, I'm going to go into Alina Powell, the youngest Powell, real quick. I don't like her, and that's why I've avoided talking about many of her comments. I understand that she's strong-willed to protect her father and her brother, but listen. In a documentary with Oxygen, Alina tells her side of the story for the first time. She recalls the events of finding out about what her dad had done, and said to the narrator that these women were visible and that her dad did not harm anyone. She basically blamed the minors that they showed themselves to her dad, and these were children, Alina. Your dad had no right. Your dad was arrested for child porn, for taping young girls in private moments. Anyway, Stephen was later arrested for voyeurism, which is taking photos or videos without the other person's knowledge. Police seized many of the computers, Susan's journals, and Stephen's disgusting, creepy mess. Josh knew about his father's creepy obsession with Susan and wasn't even upset about it, even when Stephen would talk about his love for Susan in public. No, Josh was upset about his reputation, worried that his dad's journals would be published and he would be thrown into the mix. Following the search warrant, detectives searched Topaz Mountain, a possible clue found in Josh Powell's writings after the search warrant. Susan actually visited Topaz Mountain during a camping trip with Josh and the boys, taking note that there was actual topaz on the mountain. Could this be the crystals Charlie brought up when he was questioned? On September 14th, several cadaver dogs indicated at a pile of rocks. On the wiretap, Josh showed no concern, same as in previous searches conducted with the wiretap. Police uncovered a pile of burnt wood, possibly a place where someone burned evidence. When the wood fragments were gone, the dogs did not continue to indicate. Topaz Mountain was not the only big lead in the Susan Powell case. During the search warrant, police uncovered a receipt from Michael Powell's belongings, and he sold his car to a Lindell Auto Salvage in Pendleton, Oregon, for only $100. This was 2 weeks after Susan disappeared. Michael Powell was a sergeant in the Army, and then he went to school for international studies and human intelligence. He was in the process of getting his PhD in 2011. Michael was helping Josh with the move after Susan went missing, and they both left Utah when Josh moved back to Washington. Michael was probably just helping move Josh's belongings when his car broke down. He called AAA to have his car towed, but not to the nearest auto shop or salvage yard, but to a salvage yard almost 100 miles away. The tow truck driver was pretty confused, telling Michael he could tow it somewhere closer and that it would be cheaper that way. But Michael insisted that it be towed to Lindell's Auto Salvage. When Michael arrived at the salvage yard, he said he wanted the car destroyed. The owner didn't really understand. It didn't seem like there was too much wrong with the car. Michael only sold it for $100 when it was clearly worth more than that. So what was he doing? Michael said that the transmission blew, but the owner found no problem with the transmission. When police discovered this, they immediately went to the salvage yard and asked if the car had been destroyed yet, and it hadn't. The owner said that the car was in good condition and he was selling the parts before they finally destroyed it. On September 20th, 2011, police brought a cadaver dog to the yard. Detective Ellis says that searching salvage yards can be pretty hard with cadaver dogs. There's hundreds of cars, and many of them have been in accidents with blood and possible fatalities that can throw dogs off. But this one cadaver dog zoomed right towards Michael Powell's car and indicated at the trunk. The police took the car back to Utah to do some forensic testing. They took a piece of the carpet from the trunk, and they even found some strands of hair. This was probably the biggest break in the case yet, but as we know, the strands of hair were not Susan's, and the DNA from the carpet came back as inconclusive. It is still believed that Michael Powell may have had something to do with disposing of Susan's body, so police interviewed Michael Powell to see if he'd talk. Around the same time, Josh had changed his life insurance policy so that Michael would receive over 90% of his life insurance. The rest would be split between his sister Alina and brother John. So many people believe that this was him paying his brother off for disposing Susan's body. When police asked Michael if he knew anything about Susan's disappearance, detectives say that he said, "Even if I knew something, I wouldn't tell you." Michael was going to school to get his PhD, and the detectives threatened that if he didn't talk, his career and his life would be over. Then they brought up the car that he towed 100 miles to be destroyed, and Michael was shocked. He refused to talk after this. In November, police set up a trap and trace on Josh and Michael's computers to track and record their online activities. They found that 2 months after the interview in October, Michael was still worried about the car. So worried that he contacted a company called Apollo Imaging for an aerial photo of Pendleton, Oregon, after October 2011 when the police first talked to him. They contacted him back and said that they had some images in August, but Michael insisted that it be in October or later. He would even pay over $2,000 for this picture. So it was pretty clear that he wanted to know where the car was and if police had taken it. Police found out about this request. They told a member of Apollo Mapping to send a reply to Michael that they had a more recent image that he was looking for. When they contacted Michael back again, they said that they have some of the area after that time, but he's going to have to tell us where exactly in Pendleton. He told them Lindell's Auto Salvage, the exact same place that Michael attempted to destroy his car within weeks of Susan's disappearance. So let's go back to Stephen Powell. Police uncovered the voyeur video clips and the tapes of minors nude or partially nude. These girls were found to be 8 and 10 years old. Because child pornography was found in the same home as the children were living, the Coxes were given temporary custody of Charlie and Braden. Josh would have to go to family court hearings to regain custody of his sons. When the boys went to live with the Coxes, they found that the boys were living with no rules or boundaries. When food was placed on the table, the boys would lunge at it. They clearly were not being well fed living with Josh and Stephen. This was something that Susan struggled with Josh, as she would often beg her friends to give her hot dogs to feed her kids. The boys also fought often, had behavioral problems in school, and had no routine at home. Chuck recalls that he had to start all over with the boys, starting with bedtime and taking turns. Chuck also claims that during this time, Charlie told Chuck something along the lines of, "Chuck Cox is evil." Chuck went along with this and he said, "Well, I'm Chuck Cox." And Charlie responded, "No, you're Grandpa," not connecting the two. The boys would also make multiple remarks regarding hatred for Mormons, not only to their grandparents, but also in school, as I've mentioned. Charlie and Braden were also seeing a psychologist during this time. When Charlie was asked about his mom, he said, "We can't talk about Susan or camping. I always keep things as secrets."
We can't talk about Susan or camping. I always keep things as secret.
Charlie was clearly being coached on what to say. Police also recall a previous attempt to speak with Charlie in March of 2010. He kept changing his story, but when he was on the way home with detectives, he grew worried and repeated to the detectives, "I'm telling Dad I was with friends." I think when Josh was confronted about Charlie's interview with detectives in the beginning of the investigation, he was very harsh on Charlie about what he would say again. Josh attended multiple child custody hearings to gain custody back of his boys. He told the judge if the boys could not be with him that he wanted his sons in a foster family, not with the Coxes. This just makes me so mad because I know that there are so many great, loving foster families out there, but there are plenty of awful and scary ones. Who in their right mind would want to gamble at that? Josh was also mandated to see a court-ordered psychologist, Dr. James Manley, to determine if he would regain custody. Dr. James Manley recalls that Josh would become defensive and had traits of narcissistic personality. Josh also lied about things that came out in his parents' divorce, like attempting to hurt his mom with a knife and his attempted suicide. Dr. Manley pretty much called Josh out for lying, showed him court records, and Josh said, that it was no big deal, that his mom would exaggerate. Josh admitted that he did indulge in a little adult film here and there, but he always made sure that the people in the film were of legal age. Dr. Manley also brought up Susan's disappearance. Josh completely blamed all accusations against him on the Coxes and the Mormon Church. But Dr. Manley was able to observe Josh with the boys at his new home. This was also mandated by the court because Braden Powell was being charged in relation to children. Ultimately, Dr. Manley found that Josh was a fit parent, but he still recommended temporary custody with supervised visits in a government building. They set the visits to 3 hours every Sunday because the Coxes went to church on Sundays, and Josh refused to let his kids have any association with the Mormon religion. The police were still combing through Josh's computers when they claimed to have found animated pornography showing children and family relations. When police discovered this evidence, they tried to use it right away to ensure Josh would not regain custody of the kids. The judge overseeing Josh's custody battle said that by January, Josh would regain full custody under certain terms and conditions. These conditions included family counseling. The counselor had told the boys to draw a happy picture, and Charlie drew a drawing of 3 stick figures, crossed them all out, and wrote, "Don't play with me." Around the same time, Braden drew a picture at daycare of his family camping, and he told a staff member, "Mommy is in the trunk." Detectives of the West Valley Police Department were finally able to share the 400 cartoon images and got in touch with Josh's psychologist. Dr. Manley had to add an additional report for Josh's case, expressing concern about the pictures because they showed sexual acts between children and adults. Now let's go back to the images and how they were found. The cartoon images that caused Josh's psychosexual test were actually found the day after Susan Powell went missing during the first search warrant in Utah. Prosecutors would not charge Josh at this point because they could not determine that Josh downloaded the images. And he didn't. The images were actually found on the computer that Susan owned, the only computer that she was allowed to use. Before you go jumping to conclusions like I did, wait and listen. She bought this computer from a business who was selling them for a lower price. She bought it in September of 2009. When police conducted the first search warrant, they found her computer that was separate from Josh's multiple computers. This was the computer the images were found on. Although the computer analysts could not determine who downloaded the images, they could determine when. They were downloaded in March of 2009, making it impossible for either Susan or Josh to download. It was the previous owner of the computer. Could the false accusation against Josh actually have resulted in what would happen next? We'll never know. It was Dave Cawley and his team who discovered when the images were downloaded years after the death of Charlie and Braden. Detectives of the West Valley Police assumed that the images were Josh's because they were on a computer in his home, and Josh had the majority of the computers. They were just trying to ensure the kids would be safe. Now, why did they have a reason to believe that Josh might hurt the kids? The first person to state concern about the kids being with Josh was Agent Johnson of the FBI. He completely predicted that Josh might do something to Charlie and Braden about 2 years before he actually did. He met with Stephen Powell years prior to the custody hearings and was concerned that the kids might start talking about their mom and what they knew. And they were. The Coxes took Charlie and Braden to a psychologist once a week while they were in their custody, where Charlie made comments about Susan. Detectives heard from the first statement Charlie gave following their camping trip that Susan went with them and laid with the crystals. The judge was only aware that these images were in Josh's possession, declared Josh to see a psychosexual analyst, and the temporary custody would continue along with supervised visits. This analysis would require Josh to take a polygraph test, which could potentially ask questions about Susan. Josh never took this test. He would also be required to take another test that would determine Josh's sexual interests. The Coxes speculate if there was any sexual abuse going on in the home with Josh and his sons. When the boys came to live with Chuck and Judy, Chuck says they slept naked, and the boys said they often did this with their father. The boys were taken to the social worker about this, but they determined that the boys showed no signs of sexual abuse. But based on the images found and this fact, people often speculate if this psychosexual test is a thing that set Josh off. And like I said, the visits were supposed to be in a government facility, but Josh supposedly made other visitors uncomfortable because of the fact that his wife was missing and many believed he killed her. So the social workers allowed the visits to be in Josh's home in November. This should have never happened. This was not what the judge decided, and it would turn into a catastrophe. On February 4th, Charlie and Braden are with Chuck and Judy Cox. Denise Cox, Susan's sister, and the boys' aunt came to the house to see the boys. She recalls seeing them for the last time before going to bed, playing hugs and kisses. She reminisces on when the boys first arrived to her parents' house, constantly fighting, grabbing for any food, but now they were so happy. They had received a fish tank for their birthday, and Charlie and Braden were so excited to fill it with fish. They expressed that they wanted to go to the pet store instead of seeing their dad the next morning so they could fill their fish tank. But to follow with the court order, this could not happen. On February 5th, 2012, it was Super Bowl Sunday. While people were making dinner and appetizers, putting on their Giants or Patriots jerseys, Josh had other plans. He went to the bank and withdrew $7,000 to transfer to his sister Alina's bank account and emailed her that morning telling her how to pay for his bills. During the week, Josh brought many of Charlie and Braden's toys to Goodwill to donate. He also went to a gas station and bought 2 5-gallon gas tanks that he would fill. He would send multiple emails and phone calls with these words, "I'm sorry, goodbye." At the time, Detective Ellis is chilling out at home on one of his very few days off, ready to watch the game like many other people. While Chuck and Judy Cox went to church, the social worker who supervised visits with Charlie and Braden and Josh picked the boys up. She drives to Josh's home like most of the visits they had since November. The boys got out of the car, running into the house, excited to see their father as he said, "I have a surprise for you." Elizabeth Griffin Hall, the social worker, is just a few steps behind the boys. When she arrives at the front door, she sees a disgruntled Josh who stares at her right in the eye, slams the door, and locks it. As she's pounding on the door, wondering what in the world is going on, she hears one of the boys screaming and smells gasoline. She calls the police. Now, I'm going to warn you, this 911 call is disturbing, it's heartbreaking, and it's infuriating to listen to.
Hey, I'm on a supervised visitation for a court-ordered visit, and something really weird has happened. The kids went into the house, and the parent, the biological parent, whose name is Josh Powell, will not let me in the door. What should I do?
What's the address?
It's 8119, and I think it's 89th. I don't know what the address is.
Okay, that's pretty important for me to know.
I'm sorry, I can't. Just a minute. Let me get in my car and see if I can find it. Nothing like this has ever happened before at these visitations, so I'm really shocked. And I could hear one of the kids crying, but he still wouldn't let me in. Okay, it is just a minute. I have it here. You can't find me by GPS?
No.
Okay, it is, I still can't find it. But I think I need help right away. He's on a very short lease with DSHS, and CPS has been involved. And this is the craziest thing. He looked right at me and closed the door. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just waiting to know where you are.
Okay. It's 8119 189th Street, Court East, Puyallup, 98375. And I'd like to pull out of the driveway because I smell gasoline and he won't let me in.
You want to pull out of the driveway because you smell gasoline, but he won't let you...
He won't let me in.
He won't let you out of the driveway?
He won't let me in the house.
Whose house
Got
is
the
it?
kids in the house and he won't let me in. It's a supervised visit.
I understand. Whose house is it?
Josh Powell.
Okay, so you don't live there, right?
No, I don't. No, I'm contracted to the state to provide supervised visitation.
I see. Okay. And who is there to exercise their visitation?
I am. And the visit is with Josh Powell.
And who
And
supervises?
he is the husband that I supervise.
So you supervise and you're doing the visit?
Yeah,
You're
I
supervising
supervise
yourself?
I supervise myself. I'm the supervisor here.
Wait a minute. If it's a supervised visit, you can't supervise yourself. If you're the
I
visitor...
do supervise myself. I'm the supervisor for the supervised visit.
Okay, well, aren't you the one making the visit? Or is there another
I'm
parent
the one.
that you're supervising?
No, I'm the one that supervises. I pick up the kids at their grandparents.
Yes. And then who visits with the children?
Josh Powell.
Okay, so you're supposed to be there to supervise Josh Powell's visit with the children.
Yes, That's correct.
And how did...
And he's the husband of missing Susan Powell. This is a high-profile case.
How did he gain access to the children before you got there?
I was one step in back of them.
Okay, so they
He
went
shut
into the
the
house
door
and
in
then he
my face.
locked you out.
Yes, he shut the door right in my face.
All right, now it's clear. Your last name?
My name is Elizabeth Griffin Hall.
Griffin Hall is hyphenated?
Yes.
And what's your phone number, Elizabeth?
This cell phone number is
And what agency are you with?
Foster Care Resource Network. And the kids have been in there by now approximately 10 minutes. And he knows
How
this
many
is
children?
a supervised visit. 2. Braden is 5 and Charlie is 7.
And the dad's last name?
Powell, P-O-W-E-L, L.
2 L's? 2 L's at the end of Powell?
Yes.
His first name?
His first name is Josh.
Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, native?
He's white.
Date of birth?
I don't know. He's about 39.
How tall?
5'10", 150 pounds.
Hair color?
Brown.
Did you notice what he was wearing?
No, I didn't notice what he was wearing.
Is he alone then, or is anybody
I
else?
don't know. I couldn't get in the house.
Are you in a vehicle now or on foot?
I'm in a vehicle. I'm in a Prius,
What
a
color?
2010 Prius,
What color
with
is
the
it?
doors locked. But he hasn't opened the door.
Ma'am,
I rang the
careful.
doorbell and everything.
What color
I
is it?
begged him to let me in.
Elizabeth, please listen to my questions. What color is the Toyota Prius?
Gray, dark gray.
And the license number?
I don't know. I can look.
All right, we'll have somebody look for you there.
Okay, how long will it be?
I don't know, ma'am. They have to respond to emergency, life-threatening situations first. The first available deputy
Well,
is responding.
this could be life-threatening. He went to court on Wednesday, and he didn't get his kids back. And this is really, I'm afraid for their lives.
Okay, has he threatened the lives of the children previously?
I have no idea.
All right, we'll have the first available deputy contact you.
The dispatcher obviously made huge mistakes, and I'm not going to deny that. But I'm also not going to place the full blame on him. Today, he uses this phone call and experience to teach other dispatchers not to make the same mistakes he did. He told Dateline, quote, "I was aware of Josh Powell's story, but I didn't associate his name with the story, much like I wouldn't be able to tell you the name of the 18-year-old who was just convicted of the killing that 19-year-old in Missouri. But I know the story, and so his name was not resonating with me," unquote. Like I said, this tragedy does not fall onto his shoulders. This tragedy falls on the system that demands the rights of abusive parents to have more power than the safety of children. The system that places offenders' rights over victims' rights. This tragedy is to be blamed on the sick and twisted man that Josh Powell is. By the time Elizabeth got in her car and parked it across the street, the house was up in flames. Elizabeth calls 911 again as she hears sirens and witnesses the house ablaze. There was no help until 22 minutes later. Around the same time, Alina woke up to see Josh had emailed her about his finances and a voicemail.
This is Josh. I'm calling to say goodbye. I am not able to live without my sons, and I'm not able to go on anymore. I'm sorry to everyone I've hurt. Goodbye.
Concerned for her brother's well-being, Alina calls 911. They send a deputy to check on Josh, who had already set himself, his boys, and his house on fire. Chuck Cox hears about the incident from a phone call while he's at church, so he drives to Josh's house to confirm. As Chuck arrives, deputies confirm that Josh, Charlie, and Braden had died in the fire. Charlie and Braden held hands as they and their father died. The autopsy showed that Charlie and Braden were struck by a hatchet prior to the fire. This only knocked the boys unconscious, and the boys died of smoke inhalation. This is probably why one of the boys was screaming as Elizabeth was outside, pounding on the door. This tragedy completely solidified most of the public's mind that Josh had killed Susan. Because of the possibility that he would be polygraphed, asked about Susan's disappearance, and that he would lose his boys, he felt the need to kill himself and his sons. People also speculate that Josh was concerned about the arousal test. Could Josh be a predator or sexually interested in things that he shouldn't be? It's obvious that Josh premeditated the fire and the murder-suicide, but it's speculated as to when. As I said, Josh donated the boys' toys to Goodwill, bought gas cans, said his goodbyes, but what else did he do? Well, he offered the people who were renting his house in West Valley, Utah, some slack on overdue rent. He told the renter, Dax, that he could dispose of any of his items in the storage shed at his house and use it himself, as well as take his motorcycle for scrap metal. If there was any money to be made on it, he said Dax could have it. 3 days before the fire, the day after Josh was told he would need a psychosexual examination, Josh gave his brother, Michael, full ownership of his property. Josh took his name off the house in Utah, leaving only Susan's name on the mortgage. Detective Ellis says that during the custody hearings, West Valley City discussed that they planned to arrest Josh for the murder of Susan, body or no body, but they were too late. Many people blame West Valley City for never arresting Josh. But if they did not have all of the evidence they did, including the images of children, finding the car, the wiretaps, which were a last-ditch effort, and no body, the police and the DA were extremely hesitant to bring this to trial. With Stephen Powell in the mix, Josh could point the finger at his father for hurting Susan due to his jealousy and obsession with Susan. The prosecution would have to base a trial solely on circumstantial evidence. This is terrifying when double jeopardy would not allow Josh to be tried again if Susan's body was one day found. Detective Ellis refers to the Casey Anthony case often, and they even had a body and she was acquitted, especially with the case pointing the finger at Casey's father. DSHS in Pierce County investigated the case and any wrongdoings that may have been done on their part regarding the boys' death. They found that they lacked training in domestic violence, and the communication between Utah and Washington regarding the images on Josh's computer were disclosed too late. They said that this could be fixed with more training and caseworkers speaking with detectives before changes in visitation should be made. Detectives attempted to talk to both Michael and Stephen Powell. Michael refused to talk, but Stephen was sitting in jail waiting for his trial for his child pornography and voyeurism charges. Stephen also refused to talk, but he does write about their attempt. He writes that the police tried to convince him into thinking Josh was evil, that he killed Susan because he killed himself and the boys. But what did Stephen really think about his son directly after Susan's disappeared in 2009? Well, he wrote about it in his journal. On December 9, 2009, Stephen wrote, quote, "I feel like Josh did a truly stupid thing and probably disposed of her body in a very grotesque way. I think he probably went to some former industrial land just west of West Valley City and cremated her. I don't see how he could live with an image like that in his mind. I want Josh to be with his boys, but I'm also angry with him for murdering such a beautiful woman. If he could do such a thing once, suggests that he could do it again. If things go too badly, he would murder the boys and hang himself to avoid going to prison and leaving them with the Mormon families that would no doubt take custody of them. Josh's life with Susan was utterly miserable. Evidently, this tragedy is my answer for why Josh hung on. He wanted to do his way and avoid a messy and costly divorce. Years ago, I made up my mind that Josh was one of my kids capable of doing such a thing, but our conversations of late suggested that I had nothing to worry about. Although I thought about it with concern at times, he seemed resolved that doing something so callous would be disruptive to his and his children's lives. Now I wish I had taught more that someone involved in such a crime would be caught. If I had only known, if I could only turn back time." Unquote. Even before Susan's disappearance, he writes, quote, "I have long known that they had a very unstable relationship and that Josh was only using her as a means to a financial end. Josh hates her so much, he even wishes she were dead. He even talks about it occasionally, fantasizing that she may have an accident." Unquote. Although Stephen publicly stood by his son, he continued to write about his concerns about Josh having involvement in Susan's disappearance. But on the day of the boy's funeral, Stephen Powell filed a notice to police that he is asserting his right to remain silent in regards to Susan. 2 days after the fire, Michael and Alina filed a claim for Josh's life insurance. This was controversial because Susan was not declared dead yet, and she was the first beneficiary on Josh's life insurance. Because she had not signed this authorization, this wasn't really legal. In March, the life insurance company made a claim that the federal government had to decide on the life insurance. I'm honestly surprised by this because I thought life insurance was revoked in the case of suicide, but I guess not. Michael was called in for questioning during a hearing in October of 2012. He was questioned about his use of Facebook. He claimed that he only had one account under his own name, Michael Powell. But during the computer tapping on Josh and Michael's computers during Operation Tsunami, they found the brothers were both lurking on Facebook pages regarding Susan's disappearance under an alias. They wanted to see what people were saying, what they were thinking, and the theories circulating that were mostly about Josh. Their most active state on this Facebook account was during the Ely, Nevada search. Why were they so concerned? The last activity on this account was in Minneapolis, where Josh was studying for his PhD 2 weeks before the fire. Michael Powell lied under oath about his only Facebook account. Michael was also asked about the time during Susan's disappearance and if he knew anything, but he claimed that he knew nothing regarding what happened to her. He said he never asked of Josh's involvement. He also said that he did not believe Josh had anything to do with Susan's disappearance. Michael also claimed that he had nothing to do with Susan's disappearance himself. The Cox's attorney said that Michael's eyes diverted as he said this, indicating that he was lying. In May of 2012, Stephen Powell went to trial for his charges. However, Susan was not allowed to be a part of the trial, including voyeur videos of her, because she was missing and could not say if the videos were consensual or not. But Stephen even wrote in his journal, saying, quote, "I am a voyeur and Susan is an exhibitionist. I like having the camcorder on at all times when she's around because I want to record every possible move she makes and every inch of skin she reveals to my lustful eyes." Unquote. And somehow, this was not allowed in court. The child film charges were also thrown out because Stephen had not directed the girls to pose or anything, which is just BS, and he was only sentenced to 2.5 years for voyeurism. Detectives still attempted to talk with Stephen to pry any information about what he might have or Michael and Alina might have. When his kids were brought up, Stephen went into a rage. Detectives indicated that they believe Michael may do something to himself or others, especially with his education in human intelligence and the fact that he lied under oath. And they were right. On February 11, 2013, a day shy of the anniversary of his brother and nephew's death, Michael Powell killed himself by jumping off a parking garage of his home. He parked his car on the 5th floor, went inside, and took an elevator to the top level, the 7th floor. There's video surveillance of Michael in the elevator, but not the jump itself. Within a few minutes, pedestrians walking by found Michael Powell dead on the sidewalk. His death was ruled a suicide. People assume this was caused by his depositions regarding his brother and nephew's deaths, Josh's life insurance, and as well as his endeavor in getting a PhD, all very stressful situations. Many people still believe Michael may have had something to do with relocating Susan's body. This has never been proven. In July of 2015, Stephen Powell was released on his voyeurism charges, requiring him to register as a sex offender. But then his charges of child films were reinstated shortly after his release. In July of 2015, a judge sentenced him to 5 years in prison. He was also demanded to pay over $1 million to the girls that he secretly recorded. Stephen was unable to pay this amount of money, so the girls now own Stephen's former house, the same house they were recorded in. Stephen was released in July of 2017, and he would die a year later due to heart failure. Once again, someone who may have known something about Susan died with their possible secrets. Even though Josh, Michael, and Stephen are not alive anymore, the police did not stop looking for Susan. They recovered some of Josh's computers and hard drives in the fire, discovering odd pictures and postcards that may have led them to Susan. They searched all of these places, but her body still has not been found. Police also spoke with Josh's uncle, Maurice, who may be the last person alive to know about Susan's disappearance. Maurice lived in Oregon, the same state Michael sold his car for $100, and the property was over 100 acres. Police believed it was very possible one of the Powells disposed of Susan's body on his property. In May of 2013, police ordered a search warrant with cadaver dogs at Maurice's home. The dogs did indicate possible decomposition at one spot, but of course, they didn't find anything there either. FBI gave Maurice a polygraph to see if he had any involvement or knowledge about Susan. There was nothing there. Police also searched the property of Stephen Powell's home, wondering if they could have buried Susan there. Again, nothing. Susan's case was determined closed 4 days after searching Maurice's property. Chuck Cox has not given up, trying to create legislation to prevent what happened to his grandsons to any other child. Chuck sued DSHS and the social workers after looking through their emails during the custody battle. Chuck found Josh's parents' divorce records, knowing that the social workers knew about these documents. When he saw Josh's violent behavior, such as the incident with his mother and the knife, killing an animal, and his attempted suicide, he was stunned that Josh was even able to have contact with his sons, let alone allowed to have visitation rights. While the lawsuit did not initially go in Chuck's favor, he didn't stop there. He and other legislators created what is now known as Charlie and Braden's Law. This law would prohibit parents to have custody of their children if they are suspected in a murder investigation. This was a little controversial because there could be a parent suspected and not have anything to do with a murder or anything like that, but still have their children ripped away from them. So the bill was changed to restrict contact between a suspected parent and their children by ordering visitation to be done in a supervised facility. While this was not passed in the state of Washington, Utah approved of the law and it was passed. Just recently, the Coxes received a victory against the state of Washington for the murders of their grandsons. The state was found negligent that resulted in injury. Most of the information we now know, including all of the undisclosed searches, were not released to the public until after the case went cold. The only part of the investigation that was not disclosed to the public was Operation Tsunami, because it would release important police tactics. Soon after, Detective Ellis retired. Today, he still openly talks about the case and provides classes based on his experience in his years as a police officer. The case is based on theories now as to what happened to Susan and where she might be. Of course, the biggest theory is that Josh killed Susan and dumped her in an unstable mine. I believe this theory too, but there's many other theories that I think are credible. Josh bought a blowtorch 2 weeks prior to Susan's disappearance. Again, Dave Cawley is to be credited for this theory, and he explains it really well in a video that I'll link down below. He says that he uncovered a deleted file from Josh's computer of a spreadsheet that he created documenting all of his purchases and their costs. This deleted file included many of Josh's power tools, some of which were found in the home. One tool that was missing was a power drill. Dave Cawley theorizes that the piece of melted metal found in a garbage bag in Josh's car the day after Susan was reported missing was the power drill. Like I said, I'm going to link the video down below. He literally uses the same torch that Josh used in a similar drill, and it's definitely worth watching. I mostly believe that Josh sedated Susan or continuously poisoned her over time, enough to accumulate in her system. If you remember in part 1, Susan writes about possible pregnancy symptoms, saying that one time Josh had given her leftover pizza and she became nauseous within hours. But I think it was taking too long for her to die of natural causes, as Josh had suggested Susan may have an accident one day to his father. I think Josh killed her and moved her bodies multiple times. But let me know what you think. What's your theory? So that's all we have as of today. But I also want to talk to you about what we can learn from this case. Susan suffered from domestic violence, and she made this very clear in her journals and writing to friends. A year before she disappeared, she writes, quote, "I'm finding more and more that family and friends were seeing the red flags before I did. And of course, I wish they would have said something. Of course, I realize I would never take back having my boys, and the trials I've experienced so far have made me so much stronger, and I should really thank the jerk I married for putting me through them." Unquote. At this same time, Susan was looking into divorce and set a time that if things didn't get better, she would leave. However, Susan was not able to make that decision. Please, please, if you are seeing the same red flags that you've seen throughout these videos, please get help now. Do not wait. Domestic violence is not just physical violence in the home, a popular misconception. As Susan and those close to her describe, it is when someone else takes control over who you are and what you do. Whether that is your finances, your religion, what you eat, how you look, who you talk to. Domestic violence can be verbal and emotional abuse that makes you feel worse when you're with your partner than not. As Jennifer Oxborough, Executive Director of the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition, says, quote, "We can terrorize people without laying a hand on them." Unquote. Signs of domestic violence include physical violence, consistent and irrational accusations, criticizing you to make you feel worthless, trying to control who you see or what you wear. They threaten themselves to manipulate you, pressure you into sexual interactions that you don't want, controlling your finances, isolating you from friends or family, or intimidates anyone in your life. If you see any of these signs in yourself or your loved ones, please get help. If you need help immediately, please call 1-800-799-SAFE or go to thehotline.org to chat with someone at any time if you live in the United States. This website is a great resource if you need to make a plan to make the final steps to leave, because I understand that it's not always so easy. There's also a button that you can click to automatically leave, and the website also teaches you how to delete the website from your browser history. You can also access this website if you speak Spanish. They have the option in the left-hand corner of the website. I will also leave international hotline services in the description box below. I would like to express my thanks to Dave Cawley, a podcaster who has done the deepest search into a single case that I have ever seen. Most of the information I've relayed to you has come from his podcast, Cold. Please, if you have any other inquiries or want to learn more, listen to his podcast or go to thecoldpodcast.com. They have so many pictures and hours worth of information there that I could not have possibly put in just a few episodes. I listened to over 20 hours of this podcast and his YouTube videos, and I was blown away. But as always, all of the sources I used for this episode are in the description box. I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to Susan's story that would ultimately result in the deaths of her sons in the years following. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Crime, and I'll see you next time.